Class reunion. Everyone was making a fuss and urged Sharon to go and kiss Quincy. With a flushed face, she kissed him. Quincy didn't refuse. Instead, he intensified the kiss fiercely. There was a burst of cheers on the scene. No one knew that he and I had been married for 4 years. After the party, he drove the drunk Sharon back and left me alone on the sparsely populated night road. He didn't return all night. The next day, there were several strawberry-colored bite marks on his neck. Half a year ago, Quincy started keeping a girl outside. That Sharon whom he had loathed extremely. From liking him, chasing him to being in love for nearly 10 years and being married for 4 years. I was always the one taking the initiative. He always firmly believed that I couldn't leave him. I finally understood. It was time to let go. One at the high school class reunion. Glasses clinked and laughter and banter filled the air. Quincy sat beside me, neither too close nor too far away. He drank, drinking in melancholy one after another. His eyes, tinged with the color of wine, were deep and heavy, like time had turned into a thin sharp blade. He still seemed cold and indifferent as always. I knew he was angry, but his emotions had nothing to do with me. I followed his gaze and it was precisely Sharon sitting diagonally opposite. She always seemed very gentle and quiet when alone, perhaps due to having drunk too much. Her fair face like jade was tinged with a pale pink like peach blossoms, looking extremely charming. Liam beside her would occasionally pick up dishes for her and try to talk to her. She would occasionally reply with a smile. I knew, and Quincy knew too, that Liam had liked Sharon back then. But it seemed that everyone didn't ship him and Sharon. After several rounds of drinking, everyone started playing Truth or Dare. Sharon lost. Everyone made a fuss. Sharon, come on. Go and kiss Quincy. Go quickly. Don't be a coward. That's right. If you lose, you have to admit defeat. Everyone teased, applauded, and urged Sharon to go over. She was slightly drunk. With a flushed face, she stood up hesitantly, not knowing whether to go over. The girl behind her gave her a push and pushed her in front of Quincy. As she lost her balance, she almost bumped into him, but was caught around the waist by Quincy and barely stabilized. Now, the noise around them grew even louder. Kiss. Kiss. Amid the lively commotion, Sharon lowered her head and her red lips carefully pressed over. Everyone held their breath. The relationship between them had always been delicate. Everyone knew that if Quincy didn't like it, he wouldn't care about worldly affairs. But he didn't push her away. After a moment's pause, just before she was about to straighten up and leave, Quincy raised his hand and pressed on the back of her head. His fingers sank into her ink black long hair, and he deepened the kiss fiercely. The corners of his eyes were slightly reddish. I don't know if it was because he had drunk too much or if it was like extreme longing. There was a burst of cheers and clapping. Vaguely, I heard someone say, "Is the CPI shipped back then going to come true?" I stared at the wine glass on the glass table, and watched the slightly swaying red wine reflecting the blurred colors of the indoor lights, making people dizzy. Everyone here knows that I chased Quincy throughout my middle school years. But no one knew that we had been married for 4 years. It's no wonder they were all shipping Quincy and Sharon. The story between them was indeed much more exciting than between him and me. The more hostile and resentful they were, the more they seemed like a perfect match. I remembered back in middle school. I also knew that many people secretly shipped the two of them. At that time, I nonchalantly tested him. I asked with a smile, "Everyone is saying that you and Sharon are a couple. Do you like her?" Quincy stopped writing at that time. There was disgust in his eyes. I wouldn't like her even if I liked anyone. Don't mention her name. It's disgusting. He hated Sharon so much because Sharon's father was a mistress. He always felt that it was Sharon's father who caused his parents' divorce. Later, Quincy's mother and Sharon's father reorganized their families. From then on, the two of them hated each other. But Quincy loathed Sharon even more. Although after 3 years, this reorganized family divorced again. Sharon had gradually become less hostile to him. But Quincy was still unwilling to mention her name. Even on Quincy's birthday, he accepted everyone's gifts. But he slapped away a small cake given to him by Sharon and sent her running in anger. And on her birthday, he was extremely vicious. When everyone was writing blessings, he gave her a sentence, "May all that you love in your life be fragmented." This directly made Sharon cry. I never thought. So it turns out that he likes her. The commotion around was too loud. So loud that I only felt a buzzing in my head and couldn't hear anything clearly. The overhead lights were dazzling. The sounds of glasses clinking and teasing and laughter came one after another. For a moment, I couldn't even tell if I was in a dream or in reality. It wasn't until late at night when the stars were twinkling that everyone gradually dispersed. Sharon was drunk and was pushed into Quincy's arms. "Quincy, Sharon will be in your care to send her back." He supported her and walked towards the car. Sharon was muttering to herself all the way. I didn't know what she was saying. But her body was swaying and leaning against him, until Quincy stuffed her into the car and was about to bend down and get in. He still didn't notice me. The silhouettes of the two of them under the streetlight were like a pair of romantic lovers who had experienced ups and downs. I stood under the streetlight on the other side and called his name, "Quincy." He paused. It seemed that he only then remembered that I existed and turned his head to look at me. His eyebrows were handsome and heroic, faintly overlapping with the outline of his teenage years. He frowned slightly, with a rare impatience. "Go back by yourself. She's drunk." Seeing that I didn't reply, he glanced at me and his voice was slightly cold. "Don't be so delicate. You weren't like this before." After saying that, he got in the car, and the car body quickly disappeared on the sparsely populated road. Oh, yes. I wasn't like this before. I tried hard to think about it. Yes. From our falling in love to getting married. It seems that from beginning to end, I was the one taking the initiative. He never seems to think that I will leave him on my own initiative. He doesn't think I will be willing, and probably doesn't think I can do it. I lowered my head and counted with my fingers. Liking him, chasing him, and being in love for nearly 10 years. And being married for 4 years. He occupied half of my pastime. 3. The place is remote and it's late. I tried to hail a taxi for a long time but couldn't get one. In the end, I walked for nearly an hour by myself and went home. The only regret is that I should have driven my own car here tonight. When I was halfway there, a light snow began to fall intermittently in the sky. It's a bit cold. Pushing open the door, the house was pitch dark and silent. Hiss. It seems even colder. Holding my faintly aching stomach, I staggered into the room. When I entered the room and was groping to turn on the light, I almost knocked down a painting hanging on the wall. I turned on the light, and the room lit up. Somewhat dazzling. I narrowed my eyes slightly and looked at the painting on the wall. I hung it up. It is framed with a glass frame and wiped clean. In the painting is Quincy. At that time, in the first year of junior high school, he was my desk mate. While he was sleeping, I secretly drew according to his appearance and posture. In the painting, the young man's eyelashes are as long as butterfly wings, resting on the thin morning light coming in through the window, like a butterfly's dream flickering lightly. At that time, while he was asleep, I secretly touched his nose. As a result, I didn't notice that there was ink on my fingertip. Immediately, there was a little color on his nose. When I was nervously thinking about how to wipe it off, Quincy woke up. Later, when he discovered my masterpiece, he rarely got annoyed and flicked my forehead with his bent finger. Troublemaker. I covered my forehead and looked aggrieved. But the curve of my lips was domineering. For just as I was thinking about this, my phone vibrated. I opened my phone. It was a message from my best friend, Sarah Feeney. "Are you okay?" Looking up the chat records with her, there are several videos she sent me a few days ago. Since I met Quincy, I thought his personality was always so serious and unsmiling. From falling in love and being together to being married for 4 years, His emotions have always been as calm as water. Whether it's a wedding anniversary or various festival activities, he will never show too much laughter. I thought he was like this. It was not until I saw several videos sent by my best friend that I realized that he is not unsmiling and does not dislike romance. It's just that all his tenderness and smiles are given to another person. They take walks together, play together, and stay in hotels together. I was looking through the videos sent by my best friend. In those videos, I could hardly recognize that person was him. It turns out that he will also thoughtfully pick up food for others. There is also tenderness in his eyes when looking at people. He will gently touch her head and let her rest on his thigh. Including the last video. It was half a year ago. On the day Quincy officially started dating Sharon. They were under the Bohemia tree outside the middle school campus where I once confessed to him. My best friend is a school teacher. Coincidentally, she was working overtime late that night. When she went out of the school gate, she saw them and secretly hid aside and recorded it. Except for her, none of our former classmates knew that Quincy and I were married. Because we didn't hold a banquet for our marriage. He thought it was complicated and troublesome. And I have always been afraid of these cumbersome things. So we just had a meal with our two families. My best friend and Sharon have also been good friends for many years. After much hesitation, she sent me the videos a few days ago. I finally remembered what happened on that day half a year ago. During that time, Quincy's mood was visibly bad. Now that I think about it, it was probably because he heard that Sharon was going to get married. After graduation, Sharon didn't have a good life. Her family brought her a lot of burdens and troubles. Later, her parents forced her to marry a rich second generation. The other party liked her very much. But she didn't like him. On the wedding day, Sharon ran away. She ran to find Quincy. No wonder on that day. After Quincy's phone rang, he left in a hurry before even cutting my birthday cake. You eat the cake by yourself. I thought he was because there was an urgent matter at the company suddenly. It turned out that Sharon was looking for him. In the video, when Quincy met Sharon at first, his expression still seemed indifferent. Aren't you going to get married? Sharon is a person who rarely cries. That day, she was probably mentally collapsed. She pulled Quincy and cried and said a lot. I didn't go. I don't want to get married. The general idea is that she ran away from her wedding. She had a lot to say in her heart, and didn't know who to tell. The first person she thought of was him. Quincy didn't respond and didn't speak. Later, when Sharon saw that he didn't speak, she turned around and left. Then I'll go and get married again. Quincy's expression changed. How dare you? He took a few steps forward, hugged her from behind, pressed her under the Bohemia tree, and kissed her. Later, he said, 50,000 yuan a month. I'll support you. Sharon was very angry and raised her hand to hit him. Quincy, don't go too far. But that hand finally didn't fall. She looked rather humiliated. She probably needs money very much. It seems that someone in her family is sick. Quincy started dating her like this. But his attitude towards her later was no longer that of an ordinary lover. The first few videos taken by my best friend were all encounters she had. Because Sharon's home is near the school, my best friend can often meet her and also meet Quincy looking for her. 5 After watching the videos, I suddenly felt a turmoil in my stomach and was extremely uncomfortable. I ran to the bathroom and vomited. In a trance, I remembered that for years ago, I was the one who proposed to Quincy first. I thought he would refuse. But he agreed. Not until a while ago did I recall that 2 days before I proposed to him, I heard that Sharon had a new boyfriend and was already preparing to get engaged. However, unexpectedly, they broke up half a year later. I groped my way out of the restroom, clearly extremely sleepy at night. Yet I tossed and turned and couldn't fall asleep. Without turning on the light, I sat alone by the bay window, looking at the neon night view outside the window and listening to the ticking sound of the alarm clock hands passing. Quincy didn't come home all night. This wasn't the only time. In the past, I always regarded him as a workaholic, and went to bed early myself. Not until the sky gradually showed the whitish color of dawn and the faint morning light shone through the window did I hear the sound of the door opening. When Quincy entered the door and saw that I wasn't sleeping, he was a bit surprised. I looked back at him. He didn't say anything. His expression very indifferent. If I hadn't seen the intense passion when he was kissing her, I would have thought he was always like this. He glanced at me, and when he turned around, I saw several strawberry-colored bite marks on his neck. I slowly stood up. Perhaps it was the snow outside the window that made people feel cold. My mood was surprisingly calm in an eerie way. With only a slight numbness and tingling like being pulled by a thread remaining, Quincy. His footsteps stopped. I slightly moved my numb shoulders. The ending sound carried a hint of sigh that I myself didn't even notice. Let's get a divorce. When I said those words, Quincy didn't react. I don't know if he heard it or not. As always, he changed his clothes unhurriedly. It wasn't until he reached the bedroom door that he suddenly stopped. Paused for a moment. As if he had misheard. What did you say? With one hand still tying his tie, he turned around and looked at me. I looked out of the window. After a moment of silence, I took off the wedding ring on my right hand and threw it on the table. Did you hear clearly? The diamond wedding ring sparkled with a dreamy and gorgeous light. Just like a dream. In all these years of marriage, I had hardly taken it off. But Quincy had never worn it. And it's not just this. Everything I cherish, he has never cherished. With the clear sound of the diamond ring, there was finally a slight fluctuation in Quincy's eyes. But that trace of fluctuation disappeared in an instant. He tied his tie well and frowned slightly. Don't be petty. There's a lot of work today. I'll go to the company first. He pushed the door and left. Only then did I feel the drowsiness gradually coming over me. I turned around and threw myself on the bed. The quilt that no one had touched all night was permeated with a penetrating coldness. Even when covered, it didn't feel warm for a while. Quincy. Oh, Quincy. I smiled and shook my head. Is it me who is stuck in the same place? Or is it him who has forgotten to move forward? Has he forgotten that I am no longer young, and I no longer have the courage and patience to chase him, and like him recklessly as before? 6. I went out. Until dusk. My best friend sent me a message. He and Sharon are sitting on the chair beside the bohenia tree outside the school. I drove over. After getting out of the car, I didn't walk directly towards them. I stood not far to their right and quietly watched them. Sharon seems to have changed little over the years. She is always full of girlish charm. There is a touch of cocoffousness and loveliness in her conversation and laughter. They were sitting on a bench, with rows of withered flower trees in winter behind them. Quincy seemed a bit impatient. From time to time, he took out his phone to look at it. After staring for a while, he put it back. After a while, he finally took out his phone again. After hesitating for a moment, he tapped on the screen. My phone vibrated. I took it out. It was a message from him. What are you doing? I stared at those words for a long time before I felt like laughing. Thinking seriously, I realized that this was the first time he took the initiative to send me a message. In every day before, almost every time I found time to send him messages from time to time, often after I shared many interesting things, I only got a perfunctory from him. I was used to thinking that this was his character. Now thinking about it, it's really ridiculously funny. Since he was with Sharon, in the videos sent to me by my best friend, the words he took the initiative to say to her are probably far more than in the years since we got married. I didn't reply to him. I put the phone back in my pocket, and then walked towards him. Hearing the footsteps, Quincy looked up. At the moment, when he saw me, I thought he would show at least a little panic when being caught cheating by me. But unexpectedly, his first reaction was to reach out and protect Sharon beside him. The surprise in his eyes only flashed for an instant and then returned to a calm lake. It was as if he was sure that I wouldn't do anything. Or perhaps, Those actions of mine chasing him recklessly in those years made him believe that I could never leave him no matter what. Sharon beside him looked at me uneasily. I ignored her. I took out the divorce agreement from my bag and handed it to him. You read it. If you think there's no problem after reading it, we can sign it. Quincy took it. When he saw the words on it, the always unruffled eyes finally gradually showed some cracks and astonishment. I didn't wait for him to speak. I turned and walked towards the car. Think it over. Read it carefully. And then call me. I opened the car door, got in, and drove away in a cloud of dust. From the rear-view mirror, I saw Quincy suddenly stand up and take a few steps in my direction. Then at the corner, I couldn't see him anymore. 7 After going back, I lay on the sofa and stared at the wall in a daze. After staring for a long time, my eyes were a bit tired, so I closed them again. As soon as I closed my eyes, I remembered the day I confessed to him in my sophomore year of high school. At that time, a group of my good friends surrounded me, making a fuss and joining in the fun. I was so nervous that I could see no one clearly except him. My best friend was grinning and recording the video of my confession, and all I heard was him say just one word. Okay. Until recently, I found that long ago video again. In the crowd of onlookers, I saw Sharon's figure. Before Quincy agreed to me, he looked up in her direction. When he uttered that word, Sharon lowered her eyelids and turned to leave. Now that I think about it, not long before I confessed to Quincy, Sharon got together with someone from the next class. Thinking of this, I twitched the corner of my mouth, threw my phone aside, and felt as if my heart was blocked by cotton. Extremely stuffy. It turns out that all along, I have always been her substitute. Just a shield for him to be angry with her. Like a clown, circling around him. In the end, I realized it was only my woman show. No wonder, although we have never broken up since we were together, he is so indifferent that our classmates thought we had broken up long ago. I took a deep breath and was about to throw out the messy thoughts in my mind when the phone rang. Hearing the ringtone, I didn't realize it was my phone for a moment, because the special ringtone I set for him has never rung. I let the phone ring for a while before opening my eyes and reaching for my phone to answer it. I didn't speak and waited quietly for him to speak. Quincy spoke. Why aren't you at home? I looked up at my current house and then at the time on my phone. It was 6:30 in the evening. He actually went home. How long has it been since he went back so early? It's really rare. I lowered my eyelids and my right hand, which was no longer wearing a ring and was unconsciously tapping on the table. Have you thought it over? If so, sign it. When you are free, let's go to the Civil Affairs Bureau together. At the other end of the phone, Quincy took a deep breath and lowered his voice. Are you throwing a tantrum because of Sharon? I paused slightly, clenched my phone, and my tone cooled down. Shouldn't I be angry? Quincy? From the time I chased him until now, for so many years, I have never spoken to him in such a tone. I have always spoken softly in front of him, and never yelled a single word. The person at the other end of the phone seemed stunned. I gently tapped on the table. Or do you think that I should watch you and Sharon be together and I should also send a blessing? Should I be happy? Or should I hold it in and endure it? Because from beginning to end between us, I have always been the one pleasing you. Whoever likes the other first is doomed to be inferior to the other. Right? Do you think I have no heart? I walked to the window and looked out at the vast night view outside. You don't have to pretend to be with me every day if you don't like me. Sign the agreement and let's go our separate ways. After I finished speaking a long paragraph, there was silence for a long time at the other end of the phone. Just as I was about to hang up the phone, there was a rare trace of nervousness and tension in his voice. Who agreed to get a divorce? Where are you now? When he asked the last sentence, I felt a dull pain in my heart. Absurd and ridiculous. I heard such a similar concerned sentence from him for the first time. But we have already come to this point. I said, the night is so long. I'll also take a look. See if there's a handsome young man. Pick one and have some fun. After saying that, I turned off my phone and threw it on the bed. I turned over and lay down, looking up at the ceiling. This set of house is very new. It was originally the place where Quincy and I first lived. I like it very much here. Looking out of the window, you can see a large expanse of scenery. But we didn't live here for long with Quincy before he said he didn't like it. Only then did we move to the house we live in now. Now that I think about it, it's not that he doesn't like it here. It's that this side is not as close to Sharon's place as the house over there. It wasn't until I turned on my phone again, the next day, that I learned that Quincy had been looking for me all night. There were dozens of calls from him and countless messages he sent me in my phone. If it were before, how happy I would be to see him in such a hurry. But even if he looked for me all night, he still couldn't guess where I was. If Quincy disappeared, as long as I wanted to find him, I could find him in the shortest time. I am familiar with all his preferences, know where he likes to go, and also know through which of his friends I can find him if he disappears. But Quincy is different. Perhaps only when he was looking for me last night did he realize that he had no way to contact me at all. He has never cared about anything about me. He doesn't know where I like to go. And he doesn't know through which friends he can find me. It's ridiculous that after knowing each other for more than 10 years, even though I am already his wife, his understanding of me is probably not as good as that of a colleague who has been in his company for half a year. He knows nothing. It's completely empty. I finally replied to him with a message, when it's signed. Or when you want to go to the Civil Affairs Bureau, contact me again, saying that we are husband and wife. Yet we can be so estranged. I finished washing and went to the company. It wasn't until evening that Quincy finally found me. I think he probably only knew where I worked by looking through our chat records. When Quincy came, I was about to get off work. When I saw him walk in, I suddenly didn't want to leave anymore. I lowered my head and continued typing on the keyboard, thinking that being devoted to work is also good. Quincy walked straight towards me and said in a low voice, "Serafini." I don't know how long it has been since I heard him call me by my name like this. For a moment, it seemed as if I were back in those youthful days. Suddenly, my nose felt a twinge of soreness. I concentrated on typing on the keyboard again and pretended not to hear. Colleagues around me kept looking at Quincy. A few newly graduated college students who had just joined the company secretly took out their phones to take pictures of the handsome guy. The colleague sitting next to me asked me with a smile, "Serafini, is he your boyfriend?" Quincy heard it and his expression froze slightly. Then he stood beside me, "Her husband." My outspoken colleague blurted out in astonishment, "Ah, so you are married." Quincy's face looked even worse. He bent down and asked me, "Isn't it off work? I'll pick you up and take you home." It was indeed off work. Colleagues around had left one after another. Only 2 or 3 colleagues who hadn't completed their work for the day were still working overtime. My hands typing on the keyboard stopped for a few seconds, and then continued typing. "I'm working overtime tonight, and won't be back early." It was his usual wording as before. I had thought that with Quincy's consistently aloof attitude, he would turn around and leave. Unexpectedly, he sat down beside me. "I'll wait for you." Just like I used to chase him. No matter when he was on duty for cleaning or at other times. As long as he looked back, I was always waiting for him. I stared at the screen, and my voice had a hint of sarcasm. "What are you doing now? Shouldn't our engagement be a restraint for him? Isn't he far less happy being with me than being with Sharon? Why is he dragging and refusing to divorce now? I don't understand him and don't want to think about it anymore." In countless late nights when I woke up and there was no one beside me, I had thought enough. Thought so much that I was full of worries. So tired. And as humble as dust. Just thinking about it now. When I was tossing and turning, he might be embracing a beauty and sleeping soundly. Quincy didn't answer me. He sat quietly beside me for an hour and then got up and left. I didn't even lift my eyelids. I know he won't be patient with me. But unexpectedly, after a while, Quincy brought me a dinner back. Have something to eat. Opening the box. It was sweet and spicy. I glanced at it, took the box, and pushed it to a colleague beside me. The colleague happily accepted it. Quincy's face darkened a few more degrees. Serafini, don't make trouble anymore. The colleague turned around in confusion, and looked at me and then at Quincy. Serafini, don't you dislike sweet things the most and can't eat spicy food either? Upon hearing this, Quincy was stunned for a long time. I said slowly, yes, because the one who likes sweet and spicy food is him. So in the past, I pretended to like it too. Quincy seems to have become like me in middle school, just like I chased him back then. He suddenly began to contact me and look for me attentively. But I came back later and still lived separately from him. Until I opened the door and smelled the fragrance wafting from the kitchen. I was stunned and walked inside. On the dining table, Quincy had prepared a table full of dishes, neatly arranged and still emitting fragrance. There was no spicy food. A light in the room was warm yellow. And his eyebrows and eyes also showed some softness. It was the appearance of a warm little home I had once imagined. He finally remembered that we had lived in this house before. When Quincy saw me, he took off his apron. Come and eat. I quietly glanced at the table and walked towards the living room. I'm full outside. Quincy's spoon for serving rice paused. I didn't have any extra energy to care about his every move and ponder his every thought like before. I went to tidy up my room and took out a bookshelf and read it by myself for a while. Quincy didn't make any other sounds either. Slowly, I almost forgot that there was another person in the room. When I finished taking a bath, and walked into the room, took off my shoes, and lay down on the bed with sleepy eyelids, I suddenly realized that there was someone beside me. I immediately opened my eyes and for a moment only felt extremely strange. Never before had Quincy lain down earlier than me, not knowing if I was already used to sleeping with no one beside me. When Quincy hugged me from behind, I only felt as stiff as a stone. His warm breath fell on my ear, and his voice was deep, like mellow liquor gradually bewitching. Let's discuss Sharon's matter again. A sentence woke me up like cold water being poured on me. It turns out that even at this moment, he still can't let go of her in his heart. Discuss? Discuss what? I pried his hand off bit by bit. There's no need to discuss anymore. I began to become like Quincy in the past. I came home very late, or would rather spend the night at my best friend's house and didn't want to see him. He began to come home early frequently. Just like I used to chase him. He became more and more concerned about every bit of me. He dragged and refused to divorce and always found various reasons and was unwilling to sign. I wasn't in a hurry either. I was even willing to see how he chased me. Watching him full of hope again, and again to bring me surprises and warmth and then leaving disappointed again and again. Looking at him, I suddenly understood. It turns out that when I chased him before, it was like this. Quincy is colder than me. When I chased him back then, I encountered too many rejections. I began to wonder, how did I persist in chasing him for so long? So humble to the dust. Is it also because of this that he thinks I am dispensable and worthless? I thought about it, swayed the wine glass in my hand, shook my head and smiled. All things that are easily obtained in this world are always easily taken for granted. Serafini, look, there's a handsome guy over there. My best friend pushed me beside me. He's looking over. Is he looking at you? Serafini? In the bar, among the neon lights, I saw a handsome figure. The boy turned his head. It was an elegant face as pure as snow, with a touch of youthfulness and refinement. At just one glance, I was lost in thought. It was really a face very similar to Quincy's back then. I was so lost in thought that I didn't notice that the boy pushed through the crowd and walked towards me. It wasn't until he stood in front of me that he took out his phone a little shyly, and asked if I could give him my contact information. My best friend was secretly laughing beside me and nudged me. Sure enough, this isn't the first time I've encountered this. I always seem to attract guys of the cute younger type very easily. Before I could answer, my wrist was firmly grabbed from behind. The voice was somewhat gritted. Serafini. I turned my head. Quincy was holding a large bouquet of gorgeous roses. And the fragrance of the flowers was overwhelming. On the finger that was holding me was a diamond ring flashing with cold light. But my hand was already empty. He gave the boy a deep look, then looked at me with a bit of coldness. I raised my eyebrows slightly. What are you doing? What are you doing? He moved close to my face, forcibly suppressing his anger before saying, Today is our wedding anniversary. When I heard this, I was even more surprised. Didn't you never like celebrating such festivals? Saying that, I found it funny and laughed. There wasn't a single wedding anniversary when he was around. Either he was busy with work or had other reasons not to be there. Quincy froze. After a moment, he silently stuffed the large bouquet of roses into my hand. Let's go home. Go home. I looked down at the large bouquet of roses still stained with water droplets, and then threw it into the nearby trash can. Quincy didn't have time to stop me. He just turned to look at me, his eyes inscrutable. My best friend came over from the side and took the opportunity to add a sentence. Serafini is allergic to pollen. Don't you know? I broke free from his hand and didn't look at his eyes that were instantly shocked and then dimmed. 11. I didn't force Quincy to sign every day. Nor did I make a fuss every day. But after Quincy chased me for half a year, he finally gave up in despair and agreed to sign. I know that looking at people's cold glances every day and seeing one's own passion being extinguished again and again, even if it's just small things one after another, will eventually become the straws that break the camel's back. The more I look at him, the more I see myself in the past. When I was young in the prime of my youth, I really had patience and desperate vitality, and indomitable courage. If it were me now, I'm afraid I couldn't even hold on for half a year. On the day we signed the divorce agreement, Quincy and I signed it at home. My mood was even calmer than expected. Just like countless turbulent waves had passed, leaving a silent and cold sea surface. Quincy had drunk a lot of alcohol, and was full of the smell of alcohol. I know he has always been not fond of drinking. I walked into the room and saw the photo frames hanging on the wall again. There were two. One was a painting I did of Quincy. The other one was our high school graduation photo, which Quincy hung up. In the past, I thought that Quincy hung this photo because when the graduation photo was taken, I was standing right in the row below him in front. But when I looked carefully now, at that time, Quincy, the direction his eyes were looking at, the person standing there was clearly Sharon. If I weren't in between their story, it would probably be a beautiful story of two-way secret love rushing towards each other. I shifted my gaze and looked at the painting I did hanging next to it. I reached out to take it down, but just as I touched it, the photo frame, because it wasn't hung firmly, fell down by itself. When it was falling, my finger moved and I wanted to catch it. But in the end I withdrew my hand. Suddenly, a hand reached out from behind me, attempting to catch it. But the photo frame just barely grazed his fingertip and finally fell to the ground and shattered into pieces. The flying glass shards cut his fingertip, oozing out thick blood. Quincy was oblivious. He bent down and wanted to pick up the fragmented photo frame and the torn painting. Why didn't you catch it? His voice was a bit hoarse. Didn't you paint me? So he knew. I thought he didn't know. It had been hanging in the room for so many years. Every time he walked by without looking sideways and never asked a single question. The glass shards cut his fingers piece by piece, gradually staining the ground red. I grabbed his hand. Don't pick it up anymore. Broken things are broken. Even if you piece them back together, they won't be the same as before. Does it hurt? Does it hurt to see him so scarred now? No. I feel sorry for myself in the past. If I had known that all love should be reserved, I wouldn't be so tired just thinking about the word love. The moving glass shards stopped. He slowly raised his head and his long and beautiful eyes looked at me. I saw his expression like this for the first time. The brokenness in his eyes was like the glass all over the floor. Unable to piece together a complete and unchanged appearance. He slowly reached out his hand towards me, trying to touch my face. Don't get divorced. Okay? Let's try again. Start from the beginning? I avoided his hand, turned and walked to the table, signed the divorce agreement, and shook my head. 12 After finishing the divorce procedures with Quincy, I suddenly felt much lighter. When I came out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, I walked east and he walked west. I didn't look back. It wasn't until I got into the car that I found him standing not far from where we parted, staring at me blankly, like a lost child. I removed my gaze from him and stepped on the gas. The car slowly left. Finally, one day, it's no longer me following behind him and watching his back disappear. 13 I know Quincy will be with Sharon. After all, even during the time we were having a divorce, he never said he would let go of Sharon. I wasn't surprised at all by the news of their being together publicly. But the news of their breakup came so quickly that it surprised me. Less than 7 days after I divorced Quincy. Originally, a relationship from being secret lovers to finally being in the open was so short-lived. My best friend took a screenshot of Sharon's moments and sent it to me. Sharon sent a message, "So you'd just like to seek a sense of excitement on the verge of taboos. If you had known this earlier, you might as well have told me earlier." His boredom came so quickly that it shocked everyone. After that day, I no longer paid attention to every bit of news about Quincy. But news about him always reached my ears from time to time through our mutual friends. I heard that Quincy had the photo I had broken before restored and placed it in front of his desk. From time to time, he always stared at it in a daze. The wedding ring I pawned. He still wears it on his hand. Even one day, when goose feather like snow was falling outside the window, I pulled open the curtain of the high-rise building and looked down. I saw him wearing a gray windbreaker, leaning alone by the street lamp, quietly looking at the sparsely populated road. Just like in middle school. In order to give him a surprise, I stubbornly waited for him alone in the flying snow like a fool. I closed the curtain and just pretended not to see him. I began to get used to life without Quincy. The house that seems empty and lonely as soon as I enter the door is carefully arranged by me to be warm and tidy. I can cook the meals I like to eat. I don't have to think about what he likes to eat and what he doesn't like. I can also freely hug the whole soft big bed. I won't wake up in the middle of the night and feel the loneliness of the empty space beside me. Another summer, I packed my bags and went too many places in the north and south of the country to travel. Sometimes I take friends with me, and sometimes I go alone. I see the blue and clear sea, the vast and desolate desert. See eagles fly across the sky, climb to the top of the mountain to see the sunrise and sunset, and stand in front of the snow mountain and hold a handful of coldness. These are the places that I mentioned to Quincy again and again that we should go and see together after we were together. But he always had various excuses for being busy and yet had the leisure to accompany another person. Although my close friends all said that Quincy is different now. A friend who works in the same company as him advised me, I think he really regrets it now. He hasn't taken off his ring until now, and hasn't been close to any other women. Why don't you consider getting back together? When I received this message, I was looking at the scenery on the top of the mountain. I looked down and typed back, "No. Not everything is worthy of forgiveness. And not all beautiful scenery must be seen by two people. By two people. By two people. By two people. By two people."